Hello, Hub subscribers. This is Justin Hofstetter coming to you once again with another author interview. This time we sit down with Nick Brooks, the award winning and award nominated author of Promise Boys. He's going to talk to us about how Promise Boys came about. He's going to talk to us about his upcoming book, which is actually his newly published book by the time this posts, Up in Smoke, and some other really exciting projects that he has coming up. So stay tuned for Nick Brooks, author of Promise Boys. All right. Hello, Hub readers or Hub subscribers. We are back with another one of our author interviews. We are here today. You probably know him from his smash hit Promise Boys that is on state award lists all over the country. Everybody, please welcome Nick Brooks.
Yo, thank you. Thank you for having me, Justin.
Thank you for being here. So this is a blog that our primary audience is librarians and library workers. So just to start us off, what is your, personal history, professional history with libraries, and what have libraries meant to you throughout your life and career?
Yeah, I mean, well, throughout my life, libraries, I grew up in DC, so libraries were a little bit of like a safe haven. If you didn't want to be in a neighborhood for whatever reason, or if you didn't want to, you know what I mean, didn't want to be outside because of, again, for whatever reason, some kids are getting bullied. I remember for me, there was a time when there was some neighborhood wars going on, you know what I mean? And it was kind of bad outside. And so the library was a place you could go, you could be yourself, you could have fun. I remember the early days where you could get on a computer, play video games. You know what I mean? You could do it. You could just be a kid. To be honest, you could be a kid. I used to spend a lot of time at Martin Luther King Library in DC, downtown DC, and yeah, man, it was other than just obviously being able to tap into so many worlds through these books, but also just the camaraderie amongst kids. And I don't know if we still have that today in public libraries. It's just something that is a little lost. But yeah, for me, that was what libraries were to me growing up. And obviously now as an adult and with my career, librarians are the big dogs. Those are the gatekeepers, you know what I mean? Like, so it's really cool. When I started, I come from a TV film background. So when I transitioned into writing novels, it was so beautiful to see the book community and how people are still galvanized around books and literacy. And so librarians, I tip my hat off to them. I'm also a former educator. I taught in a traditional classroom. So again, librarians, I know the job that they have and what they're tasked with, and so I respect them and yeah, and I appreciate them.
So you mentioned, coming from film, coming from TV, coming from music, and then transitioning into writing. What brought that transition about?
Man, to be honest, COVID. I came out of film school, USC Film School in 2020, and literally I came out, when pandemic hit, I didn't even get to walk across the stage, and so I'm locked in the house trying to figure out what to do. The industry shut down, everybody's isolated, and so for me, it was like I need to be writing, I need to be doing something, I need to be making music, and so I had stepped away from writing books and making music around 20. I'd say around 2016. Music much earlier, but I was already writing books. I was writing children's books, but I was self-publishing. And this is when I was in the classroom and I was teaching. And I stepped away from it, went to pursue film, and it was going really well. And yeah, and then pandemic hit, man, and I had to figure out something else. I had to pivot, and that's a big part of my story. Always finding a way to pivot and be flexible. But that's what got me back into writing books. It's got me back into making music, and so and from 2020 to now, I could say it was the right decision.
Absolutely. And so I didn't know that you had a background in teaching, but having read Promise Boys,
Yeah.
just as a school librarian, we can always tell when an author actually knows schools.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about Promise Boys. How did Promise Boys come about, and how much of that is based on your own life, your own experiences, putting that into a narrative form?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it came about in a really interesting way. Basically, I'll try to sum it up quickly because it's a few moving parts. But essentially, I wrote a script with my co-writer, who is also a novelist. I wrote a script with him. It was our first script we wrote together, and he sent it to his book agent because he was like, "Yo, you gotta." Me and him went to film school together. That's how we met. And he said, "Yo, you gotta meet this guy, Nick. Like he's a great writer, great voice. I'm sure he bragged about me, which was great. And so his agent wanted to meet me, and because she was like, "Hey, are you interested in writing books? What's your story? What's your background?" And when I told her my story, my background, I love mystery. The script that we had sent her was a mystery script. Told her I love mystery. I'm a former educator. I taught boys. In high schools, I taught at-risk boys. And I was telling her all these things and what I'm trying to do, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, like, we've been working on this concept." Her and another author have been working on a concept that they were looking for somebody who could come in and build on it and flesh it out and execute a novel around it. And so yeah, they kind of pitched me the idea like, yeah, we're trying to do a murder mystery at an all boys charter school. And I was like, say less. Like that's what I do. I come from that background. I taught boys, and I'm a murder mystery writer. And that was it. And I sent them. I did the outline. They were like, "This is great. Can you do some pages on it?" I did the first 50 pages, or the first 25 pages. They were like, "Oh my goodness, this is great." Did the first 50 pages, and by the time I got to the first 100 pages, they was like, "Okay, we need to take this out. Like, this is going to be amazing." And then it was a huge bidding war for it.
And so, from a craft perspective, thinking about how you originally approached this as, a screenwriter, is
Yeah,
that where the constantly shifting perspectives idea came from, or is that just a style that you've always wanted to explore?
a little bit. Yeah, they asked me to read a book called How It Went Down, and I read that book. They said, check this book out. It's not necessarily mystery, but it's YA, and it has this shift in perspective, and see if that, because the concept was always going to be there were three boys, and so it was always going to be kind of a revolving perspective. And I read How It Went Down, and I just really locked in on that, and I clicked in on it, and I I kind of overdid it. I kind of wrote all of these perspectives. Like, okay, we got to pare this back a little bit. But initially, and probably there were obviously the three protagonists, JB, Trey, Ramon, but there's all of these community members. And initially I had so many, I had the bus driver, I had the corner store owner. I mean, some really, really great passages from all of these people in the community. So we had to pare it back a little bit. But it really what came out of that was kind of always the concept. And then how it went down inspired me. But then also, yes, being a filmmaker and seeing films like Knives Out or Vantage Point, or knowing, even going back to Clue and the whole Agatha Christie of it all is like, those are some of the films that I really, really gravitate towards. I love multi-perspective, particularly in mystery, because it allows you to hide the ball in so many places, right? It allows for all these reveals and revelations and secrets. And sometimes you're able just you know, in a weird way, trick the audience or the reader, because everybody's POV is different. So they might interpret a thing that happened one way, and then you go to another perspective, and it was something completely different over here. So again, it has the truth, right? So anyway, it was just a great, all of these kind of things came together and just made for a great feature for a book like Promise Boys.
And I love what you said about kind of that hiding the ball. I think when I first met you at ALA last summer, I was standing in your line and I was reading the chapter. I was at the point where the straight A student was the prime suspect all of a sudden by the
Yeah,
three boys, and I
yeah,
was like, don't tell me if he actually did it. But I loved
yeah,
that kind of reveal
yeah,
on
yeah,
that one.
absolutely.
Is there one of the perspectives that you enjoyed writing from more than the others?
Man, I love them all. They all have really big chunks of me. Like JB was the first perspective I wrote. And I feel like that is the most similar to me as a kid. Even with him, writing the raps on the bus, right? Like that was me. You have Ramon, who is the hustler of the group. That's how he's always, looking for something to sell, looking for a way to make a buck to help his family. That was also me, as a kid, just always trying to find a way to to make ends meet. And then you have Trey, who has this really kind of tumultuous relationship with his uncle, which was really married after my relationship with my stepfather. So all of these boys have there's something in me in each of them. You know what I mean? And I tried to find things, and you could say it happened by accident, or you could say I did it subconsciously. But when I write, I'm always trying to write from an authentic place, and so that just kind of happened. Me putting these things in each of these boys' lives that mirror real things from my own life.
Um, so I'm not sure how much you've heard this from students and or from, adults that work with kids, but this is kind of the all-star for the reluctant readers.
Yeah,
Whenever
yeah,
I talk to classes, I read Kiana's chapter, and then I have
yeah,
kids like rushing to get a copy of it. And one of
yeah,
my favorites is a girl who had never checked out anything all year. I
yeah.
read Kiana's chapter, and by the end of her class is 20 minutes in the library. She's already on like chapter 5 or 6.
Wow.
Um, did you have those reluctant readers in mind when you were writing Promise Boys, or is that just something that came naturally and it just appealed to them on who you are?
You know, it's something that came naturally. And I think, they call it a lot of things call it beginner's luck. They say, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? So you take these risks, excuse me, do things that you don't overthink. But for me, Promise Boys came from such a just an authentic, like such a flow, like and like as far as like voice and tone and everything that I think it naturally connects with those kids because again, I was that kid. You know what I mean? Like that for me growing up, I started writing and this is the thing, and this is something that I'm working on with Up in Smoke, and I'll get to that. But you know, I started writing, I guess you would call it poetry at like 14, right? And then I started the first time I stepped into a studio, I was maybe 15. But I was really into rap. I didn't necessarily I read books that were far, far, as far not age appropriate. I was reading like Walter Mosley, at like 13, which you're, if maybe a 13-year-old should be reading that. But the other thing I would do, I was like printing out rap lyrics, and reading rap lyrics. And so again, anyway, I was that kid, and that's just my voice, and even being from a city like DC, which is obviously majority black population, crime rate, and particularly at the time I was coming up in the late 90s and early 2000s, reeling from the effects of the crack epidemic, all of these things are just a part of me. And so, just writing naturally, I think it just connects with those kids because they see themselves reflected, right? They see their truths reflected, their culture reflected, and kids also who don't come from that, they also love the book because again, I think at the end of the day, it feels authentic, and these characters feel lived in, right? They have real experiences, real challenges that we all have, no matter what walk of life you come from. Anyway, to answer your question, I don't think it wasn't intentional then, but after hearing that a lot, it definitely is something that I am proud of and something that I want to continue because I think that's important.
And you mentioned voice a lot.
Yeah,
What what went into making these kids one actually feel like kids and not as you see a lot in books for young people, the characters just feeling like miniature millennials. Uh,
yeah,
how did you make them feel like kids in their dialogue and in their action, and how did you make them also feel super distinct from each other?
yeah. Well, it was a couple of things. I think I'll start with making them feel distinct. It was about giving them different entry points into their hearts, right? So for JB, it was Kiana. For Ramon, it was his grandma. For Trey, it was his mom. Basically building their story and their character around who they love the most in their life. I think was one way to help. Giving them again distinct characteristics as far as like JB being the quiet type, Ramon being the kind of slick talker, Trey being the class clown, giving them, you can say they're tropes or archetypes, but those type of things do help. They do matter, at least as far as rooting me in. Where's the baseline, and then from there, building on that, again, I'm pulling from either my own experience, my friends' experiences, teachers or kids that I've taught, kids that I've coached. I used to coach Little League football. So I think the reason that they feel real is because I'm pulling from real places, essentially. It's like and to your point about, librarians can tell when books are particularly YA or kids books are coming from writers who were in the schools, you can always tell. And it's because it's coming from a real place. And because I spent so much time in education, I spent so much time around kids, spent so much time in my community, I think I'm able to draw from real places. And that's why the kids feel both real and distinct,
Yeah, yeah. And I think another thing that really makes Promise Boys so popular is that you don't shy away from hard conversations. You don't shy away from hard situations that real kids face.
Mhm.
To go along with that, how much pushback have you received either from community groups or from parents, from educators? Have you received pushback from some of the content in the novel?
Not a ton. I've heard a couple like, and not a lot. Like maybe literally like maybe one or two times somebody has said kind of like a, oh, I love it, even though it had that swear word in it. You know what I mean? Like, and they're usually older. Like you can imagine the person that says that. But 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 that's it. I mean, again, that's only happened once or twice. And I always, they always kind of laugh it off, and they're always very gracious when they say it, and and still give the book, high praise. And I always just say, kids are hearing and saying far worse than what's in Promise Boy. Because it's like, yo, have you been a kid? You know what I mean? Like, I remember when I was a teenager. You know what I mean? The type of, so it's like, but overall, no, not at all. If anything, it's just been embraced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and over the last year, year and a half, you've been starting to make all these award lists, all these state lists. Just what has that done for you personally? What does it feel like to just all of a sudden kind of explode onto that YA scene and be one of the, now kind of top dogs on those lists?
Man, I mean, to be honest, that's the first time I'm hearing it put that way. I guess I didn't look at it like that. When the awards come through, I usually get a email. Sometimes I'll get an email straight to my, on my website. They're like, "Oh, just to let you know, you've been nominated for this thing," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, dope, thanks." Or sometimes I'll hear from my publisher. They'll be like, "Hey, Nick, we got this award in," or something like that. Like most recently, the Magnolia Award down in Mississippi was really dope, and I got to, I did a little video for them. So that feels, those moments always make me really proud and let me know like, okay, this is resonating, which is reassuring, especially for artists, because you want to make sure your work is connecting. So it's definitely reassuring. But I never quite looked at it like, it's we're so isolated. And me, I'm in Los Angeles. People are just so isolated and there's kind of silos. I'm constantly working, my head down in my work. So I've never, like I said, I've never heard it put that way, but that's dope to hear. I would love to be. I think for me, the thing that would really help me feel that is like I would love to be getting out to schools more. I would love to be getting invited out to more schools and um kind of, and being able to be with the kids and sign books and do book talk. Like I think that would help me feel like that. And maybe people are reluctant to reach out. They might think I'm busy or whatever, but I think that would be really cool. But yeah, man, that's dope to hear. And it just makes me proud and it gives me a little bit of confidence that maybe, I can make a career at this.
Well, you've mentioned it a few times, and you're making a career of this because the success of Promise Boys is now leading to your newest novel, Up in Smoke.
Yes,
By the
yes.
time we post this, it'll already be out, but at the time of
Okay.
recording, it's coming out next Tuesday. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Up in Smoke?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, Up in Smoke is another thriller murder mystery set in DC. And it's about two kids, Cooper and Monique, who are solving a murder that takes place at a Black Lives Matter protest. Yeah, and it's really it's a ride. It's almost a little bit of an undertone of like a political thriller. Because the book kicks off with this huge protest and there's a shooting and I don't want to say too much, but essentially both kids are connected to this murder, and so one of them potentially will go down for it if they don't figure out what actually happened. And Monique, her big brother, is also on the hook for going down for this crime, and so they pair up, and it's a great whodunit, man. Like I think this is a really tight mystery. There's also a lot of feedback that I got, not really feedback, but praise was the relationship between JB and Kiana and Promise. And so I really wanted to double down on that and give a whole book. Like if people love JB and Kiana, they're gonna love Cooper and Monique because the whole book is just that. Is imagine if JB and Kiana were the ones solving that crime and Promise. It's Cooper and Monique. And so of course there's this, will they, won't they romance through line through the whole book. And so, that was for a lot of young women, young girls who loved Promise. They couldn't stop speaking about Kiana, and so now we have a whole book with like I said, Cooper and Monique. And here's the cover, Up in Smoke. And so the cool thing about this one like I said, it's dual perspective. But I'm also going to be dropping a hip hop album that's told from a third perspective that will have clues to the murder in the book. So again, it's a way, kind of to your point of really pulling in reluctant readers. I know for people who follow me on that side in the hip hop space, it's about creating this doorway and it's opening to invite them into the world, the literature side, and vice versa. There may be some people, some readers who like my work, who may also like my music, and so it was just a cool way to pair these two mediums. And again, when I tell librarians about it, they're always excited to be able to pitch that to their kids who don't want to read. It's like, look, there's a but they love rap. And again, this is me, this is for that inner child, right? For me, it's like as a kid, if that would have happened, it would have made me fall in love with books in a way, you know what I mean? That it took me many, many more years for that to happen because people were not meeting me where I was at. And so again, as a former educator, understanding meeting kids where they're at, it was like, yo, this could be something really cool to do. So yeah, I'm excited about it, and we're gonna see. Hopefully it connects, like you said, and kids all over are taking them off the shelves.
That's wow. Yeah, and the idea of the album paired with that's going to be such a great sell for kids.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned, the inciting incident is a murder involving a Black Lives Matter protest.
Mhm.
Did you have any trepidation about wading into kind of those social political waters with the way the social and political climate is now? Did you have any trepidation about wading into that as a YA author?
No, not at all. I mean, and similarly with Promise, the themes are there, but there it's not preachy, hopefully, right? And similarly with Up in Smoke, it's like, yes, there's a protest and yes, there's a officer involved shooting. Um, but that's not, we don't focus on that. The focus really is on the kids trying to solve this crime and figure out what happened. And through that, we get to talk about all these other cool themes. But actually your question, your question of like the trepidation because of the climate now. If anything, it made me more inclined to write something like this. You know what I mean? Because it's needed. One of the a lot of the themes in Up in Smoke talk about like what it means for a young kid to be an activist or today, right? What it means for a young kid to be a revolutionary today. And I think that's actually needed because of the climate. So it didn't, if anything, the climate encouraged me to write a book like this now because I want kids to have that dialogue of what does it mean to be an activist? What does it mean to be a revolutionary? How do we be the change that we want to see? Those are a lot of the things that Cooper is dealing with in the book because coming into it, he's not conscious in that way, right? And then by the end, he is. And so I think, yeah, for me, it was all about allowing kids to have that conversation through this book.
Okay. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, and taking, the idea of woke away from being a derogatory swear word and realizing like this is what it's supposed to be and this is where it's
yeah,
supposed to have come from.
yeah, exactly. And again, it's not heavy-handed, because I think there's a way it can be done where it's really, really heavy-handed. Um, but it's not that at all. Again, if anything, it's just a really great mystery. And then you're kind of picking up these breadcrumbs that I'm leaving through the book.
It's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so that one, like we said, it'll be out by the time this posts. What are your plans after that? Do we have another work in progress after that?
Yeah, man, I got a lot of things working. Um, I'm working on a graphic novel right now, that we may announce in the fall. That's going to be really, really big. I got, working on a video game right now that's also probably the most anticipated video game ever in the history of video games. Um, and so I don't know exactly when that'll come out, but hopefully at some point. And then what else? Yeah, man. And then like I said, even with Promise, working on the TV show, just working on a lot of different, just working on a lot of different things, just I'm still very much in the TV film space, so constantly working on that and that side. So a lot of things. I encourage people to like to to hit me up on the socials, follow me on the socials, so you can kind of see the journey and keep up with some of the things that's happening because there's definitely a lot going on. But yeah, but the most immediate is certainly Up in Smoke, and I'm excited for it to come out and to see. I'm hoping that it's just sophomore one, right? So I'm hoping that readers, young readers, teachers, librarians, parents, like I'm hoping it connects in the same way that Promise did, and again, and I can keep it going.
Right. And we'll make sure to drop your social links on the post for this. So you alluded to it. Are we getting Promise Boys on the screen?
Man, that's the hope. It was picked up by Netflix. We sold it to Netflix, and it was being produced by Barack and Michelle Obama. And so yeah, yeah. So we're still a little bit, we're gonna see where the fate lies, just because even even since then, the Hollywood has had such a weird sh like many weird shifts. We had a strike, and then they had some fire. The fires. It's like a lot of things have happened, so we're still kind of awaiting its fate. But if that doesn't work out, the goal is definitely to see it on screen, and it's been pushed. And I mean, all of Hollywood knows about it. It also had a big kind of like bidding war on the TV film side, so definitely we should be getting it. But again, it's one of those things. We're a little bit at the, at the whim of Hollywood. So we'll see.
Yeah. Which was bigger for you, finding out that teen readers are embracing this book, or finding out that Barack and Michelle were embracing this book?
To be honest, man, I think the teen readers, learning that teen reader because it just gives it its life. You know what I mean? And because even if it doesn't work out here with Barack and Michelle, if teen readers are really connecting with this book, it's going to always have a life, and that's really important to me. And again, to your point, I know that they'll trust me to pick up my next one and my next one. So that's really important that the readers is connecting with the readers. That's most important.
That's wonderful. We're about to wrap up here because it's about to be passing period here in my
Yeah.
library, and we're kind of in unofficial hallway, so it gets a little bit crazy in about 10 minutes. Um, just wrapping up, do you have any final thoughts for the librarians that are watching and learning more about you and your career?
I just want to say thank you first and foremost, for supporting Promise and the way you have and getting it in front of students. Again, that's what's most important to me. I really, really want these kids to read these books. I want them to be inspired to continue to read, inspired to write. And I would say, please check out Up in Smoke. It's coming out May 6th. I think, like you said, as this posted, it'll be out then. But yeah, please look into it, and if you like it, let's do the same thing. Let's get it in front of students and go from there and keep in touch. Invite me to your schools.
And yeah, we'll put your contact information down below so we can make sure that folks can get you in your school in their schools. Because yeah, I'm going to be talking to my budget people because just with the way that you talk about kids and the way that you talk about books, I just think it's going to be magical for a lot of our teen readers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, good luck with Up in Smoke and really looking forward to some of these other projects that you talked about.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Peace.